Hi there, welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight's tale begins not with blood or violence, but with something deceptively ordinary, a shattered teacup. Its broken porcelain whispers of secrets too delicate to be spoken aloud. Who broke it? And why does this fragile object hold the power to expose a deadly truth? In a world of Hercule Poirot, even the smallest fragment can unlock a web of lies, betrayal, and murder. Stay with us until the very end, for within the pieces of this teacup lies a puzzle that only Poirot's little gray cells can solve. And before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more mysteries that linger long after the story ends. Chapter 1: Fragments of Silence. The storm came down upon London with a fury that seemed almost biblical. The sky was a rolling sea of black clouds, split with jagged forks of lightning, and the rain struck the streets in relentless torrents. Inside the townhouse of Lady Agatha Harborough, the sound of the storm was muffled, though it pressed against the windows with every gust of wind, rattling the glass as though demanding entry. The drawing room was dimly lit, shadows swaying along the walls in rhythm with the fire that crackled weakly in the grate. And in the center of the room, on a low mahogany table, lay the object that held Hercule Poirot's entire attention. A teacup, or rather, what remained of one. 6 pieces of delicate porcelain lay arranged with unnatural precision. The floral motif was interrupted by jagged edges, the gilded rim torn into splinters. A single dark stain clung to the largest shard, its surface sticky, a shadow of something that had seeped into the glaze. Poirot sat perfectly still, hands folded, his sharp eyes moving from fragment to fragment, as though piecing together not just porcelain, but a story. Chief Inspector James Harold Japp stood at the hearth, his heavy shoulders blocking part of the firelight. His face, lined with years of hard cases and harder nights, carried that familiar mixture of irritation and admiration reserved only for Poirot. "You'll forgive me, Poirot," Japp said at last, scratching the back of his neck, "but I can't help thinking we've wasted your time. A cup breaks in a wealthy woman's house, and suddenly it's fit for the great detective himself? Don't tell me you see a murder in every chipped saucer." Poirot did not glance up. "Non, Japp, not in every saucer. But in this cup, yes, perhaps, there is murder." Japp gave a sharp laugh. "You're joking." "Do ist," Poirot replied, lifting his gaze. His mustaches twitched, immaculate and proud, and his eyes gleamed with that strange fire Japp had come to recognize. "The break is deliberate, too violent for a mere accident. And the stain, observe, this is not tea, but brandy. Brandy in a teacup, mon ami, is already a curiosity. But brandy spilled, and then the cup dashed to pieces. This is something else entirely. It is not the cup that speaks to me. It is the hand that broke it." Before Japp could respond, the door opened with a sharp crack, and Lady Agatha Harborough entered. She was a striking figure, despite her years. Tall, proud, her gown of deep green velvet clinging with elegance, her dark hair streaked with silver but arranged with meticulous care. Yet the poise was betrayed by the tremor of her hands, the tightness of her jaw. Her eyes fell at once upon the fragments. For the briefest instant, a flicker of fear crossed her face before she mastered it with aristocratic composure. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice cold and formal, "I did not request your presence." Inspector Japp insisted upon it. "This is a domestic matter, nothing more." Poirot rose, bowing his head with graceful courtesy. "Lady Agatha, forgive my intrusion, but I believe this cup does not tell the tale of mere clumsiness. It tells the tale of violence. And violence, it has a way of spreading its shadow further than one expects." Her lips pressed into a line. "You are mistaken. My nephew lost his temper, that is all. He is young, hot-blooded, reckless. He dashed the cup against the hearth, a foolish act, but nothing more sinister than that. "And where's your nephew now?" Poirot asked softly. "He stormed out an hour ago, into the rain. He will return when he has cooled his temper." "Ah, Poirot murmure." So young men storm out. But cups, they do not shatter themselves. Lady Agatha turned away, her shoulders stiff, as though unwilling to be pinned by Poirot's gaze. The door opened again, this time to admit Clara, the maid. She was pale, timid, her eyes downcast as she carried a silver tray that trembled slightly in her hands. Her voice, when she spoke, was unsteady. "My lady, forgive me, but it's Mr. Richard they've found him. In the conservatory. He's not moving." The tray slipped from her fingers, clattering against the floor. Lady Agatha gave a sharp cry, her composure shattering at last. Japp swore under his breath, and Poirot was already moving, his steps quick, precise, carrying him toward the conservatory without hesitation. The conservatory was a world apart from the storm outside. The glass walls trembled with the impact of rain, while within, the air was heavy with the scent of lilies and damp earth. Amidst the pale blooms and dark leaves lay Richard Harborough, sprawled upon the tiled floor. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, his face pallid, his eyes closed. A decanter lay on its side beside him, brandy pooling across the tiles. Poirot knelt at once, fingers to the wrist. For a moment, the silence seemed absolute. Then he spoke, his tone quiet but firm. "He lives. Barely. Quick, Japp, fetch a doctor." Japp hurried off, barking orders to a constable who had just entered. Lady Agatha lingered in the doorway, her face stricken, her hand clutching the frame for support. Poirot's eyes swept the scene. The fallen decanter. The glass beside it, unbroken but cracked faintly along its rim. He lifted it delicately, holding it to the light. A faint residue clung to the edge, something white, powdery. His eyes narrowed. "So, it is as I feared." Lady Agatha staggered forward. "What is it? What has happened to him?" Poirot turned, his expression grave. "Your nephew has not merely drunk too much brandy, madam. He has been poisoned." The words fell into the room like a stone dropped into still water. Lady Agatha gasped, her hand flying her mouth. Clara gave a small cry and nearly collapsed against the doorframe. The constable looked from Poirot to the young man on the floor, his face blank with shock. Poirot set the glass down carefully, as though it might still bite. His mind worked swiftly, cataloging details with mechanical precision. The broken teacup in the drawing room, the brandy in the conservatory, the violent quarrel between aunt and nephew, and now the boy, Richard Harborough, lying on the edge of death. "Inspector Japp," Poirot said calmly as the yardman reappeared, "you will see that no one leaves this house until we have answers. There is a hand of malice at work here, and it is still within these walls." Japp's jaw tightened. He nodded curtly, his voice snapping orders to the constable to secure the exits. Lady Agatha swayed where she stood, her voice breaking. "Monsieur Poirot, who would do such a thing? Who would harm my nephew under my roof?" Poirot's gaze flicked briefly to her before returning to the young man on the floor. His eyes were distant, inward calculating. "That, madam," he said softly, "is what we shall discover. But mark this well. The puzzle of the shattered teacup is no longer a matter of porcelain. It is a matter of life and death." The storm raged outside, a relentless pounding of rain against glass. But inside the conservatory, a darker storm was gathering. Poirot, his little gray cells already stirred into motion, understood what few others yet did. The night had only just begun, and its shadows concealed secrets that would not be easily revealed. Chapter 2: Shadows Among the Glass. The storm had not relented. If anything, The thunder outside grew fiercer, rolling across the rooftops like the sound of distant cannon fire. Lightning illuminated the glass walls of the conservatory, bleaching the room in white before plunging it back into gloom. Hercule Poirot stood still amidst the scent of lilies and the soft drip of brandy pooling across the tiles, his eyes fixed upon the young man who lay unconscious before him. Richard Harborough's face was pale, almost waxen, his breathing shallow, irregular. The arrival of Dr. Edmund Travers, a tall, gaunt man with hair as white as chalk, brought with it a sliver of hope. The physician knelt briskly beside the young man, producing instruments from his worn black bag with a speed born of long practice. "Poison, you say?" Travers muttered as he examined Richard, his voice tight. "What makes you certain?" Poirot indicated the glass. "Observe, doctor, the residue along the rim. White, powdery, insoluble in the brandy itself. I would wager it is strychnine, or something of equal cruelty." Travers frowned, sniffing cautiously at the glass. "Yes, perhaps. God help him if so. He'll need immediate treatment." Jap, pacing like a restless hound, barked his impatience. "Treatment? Can you save him?" "I shall try," Travers said sharply. He signaled Clara to fetch hot water, clean cloths, anything that might be useful. His hands moved with a strange blend of delicacy and urgency as he administered a draught from a small vial. Lady Agatha stood rigid by the doorway, her knuckles white against the frame. She looked less like a woman of society now and more like a specter, her mask of control eroded by fear. "My nephew, my poor boy. Who could have done this?" Poirot turned toward her, his gaze steady. "That, madam, is precisely the question." The household gathered soon after, summoned by Jap's orders. They arrived reluctantly, like actors pressed upon a stage they did not wish to tread. Poirot studied each in silence as they assembled in the drawing-room. There was Eleanor Harborough, Lady Agatha's younger sister, a widow who lived nearby and was often a guest in the house. She carried herself with the grace of long habit, though her eyes betrayed unease. At her side stood her son, Thomas, a solemn boy of 17, who kept glancing at the fragments of the shattered teacup still lying upon the table. The maid Clara, pale and nervous, hovered at the back, twisting her apron. Beside her was a manservant, Henry, broad of shoulder and dour of expression. His eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, rarely lifted from the floor. Jap surveyed them all like a general before his troops. "Right," he began, "no one's leaving this house tonight. Young Richard's life is hanging by a thread, and someone here knows how poison found its way into his glass. You'd best speak now, before I find the proof myself." A hush fell. Rain battered the windows. Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm, almost soothing. "Let us not shout, mon ami. The truth, it is delicate like porcelain. If we press too hard, it may shatter further." He turned to the assembled household. "One of you placed poison in the brandy. One of you sought to end the life of Richard Harborough. And you believed, perhaps, that the broken teacup would mask the deed as temper, as accident. But the cup, it betrayed you." Eleanor gasped softly. "You think one of us attempted murder? But why? Who would wish Richard harm?" Poirot raised a hand. "That is what we shall discover. But first, we must understand Richard himself. Who is he? Where are his enemies? His weaknesses?" Lady Agatha drew herself up, though her voice shook. "Richard is impulsive, headstrong. He has squandered much of his inheritance on gambling, on foolish ventures. He has enemies, yes, debtors, men who would see him ruined. But here, under my roof, no, surely not." Poirot's eyes lingered on her, then drifted to Eleanor. "And you, madam? What say you of your nephew?" Eleanor hesitated, her hands clasped too tightly. "Richard is charming, when he chooses to be, but he is reckless. He and my son Thomas, they do not get along. Richard often mocks him, calls him dull, a coward. Thomas flushed. He despises me because I refuse to follow him into his debauchery. He sneers at me, says I'll never be a man. But I would never wish him dead. His voice cracked, more from anger than grief. Poirot's mustaches twitched as he studied the boy's clenched fists. Then his gaze shifted. And you, Henry? You serve this household faithfully. What say you of young Richard? Henry shifted uneasily, his heavy jaw tightening. He treats me poorly, sir. Calls me names, throws things when he's drunk. But he's the master's blood. Not my place to judge. Poirot inclined his head, then turned at last to Clara. The maid started, eyes wide. I don't know anything, sir. Mr. Richard is loud, cruel sometimes. But I'd never. Her voice trailed away, and she glanced nervously at Lady Agatha. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. So, we see a young man who inspires little affection. And yet, the attempt upon his life is bold, dangerous. The poison was placed not in a random glass, but in his. Which of you had the opportunity? Jap cut in, his voice sharp. We'll find out. I'll search every inch of this place if I have to. Poirot raised a finger. Patience, Jap. The truth, it comes not by tearing the house apart, but by listening. Observe. The broken teacup, it tells us the moment of crisis. Richard quarrels with his aunt. He dashes the cup. But why dash it? Because he tasted something wrong? Because he feared exposure? Already, the cup speaks of more than temper. Eleanor shivered. You mean, he realized he had been poisoned? Poirot gave a small nod. It is possible. But whether he realized or not, the hand that poisoned him believed the broken cup would mask suspicion. And yet, here we are. The hours crept on. Dr. Travers worked tirelessly in the conservatory, and at last he brought word that Richard would live through the night, though his recovery was uncertain. Relief swept through Lady Agatha, though it was tinged with dread. Poirot spent the interim pacing the drawing room, his eyes darting to the fragments again and again. He crouched at one point, examining the stain with a small magnifying lens, murmuring softly to himself. Jap watched him with weary amusement. You'll wear a hole in that rug, Poirot. Just tell me, who's our culprit? Poirot straightened slowly. Not yet, Jap. The puzzle is incomplete. A cup shattered and nephew poisoned, a family trembling. There's one piece missing. And what's that? Poirot's gaze was distant. The motive. Always the motive. Later that night, Poirot asked to see Richard's study. Henry led him through the darkened corridors, a lantern casting long shadows along the walls. The study was a room of contrasts, chaotic papers strewn across a desk, half-empty bottles in the corner, yet fine leather-bound volumes lining the shelves. On the desk lay a pack of cards, worn with use, and a small ledger scrawled with debts and names. Poirot flipped through the ledger, his expression grim. Gambling debts. Large ones. Names I recognize. Men of ill repute. If he could not pay, they would ruin him. Or worse. Henry shifted uncomfortably. He asked me to pawn some of Lady Agatha's jewels last month. I refused, of course, but he was desperate. Poirot nodded slowly. Desperate men make enemies. Enemies make murder. He paused, his eyes flicking to the window. Outside, lightning lit the gardens in ghostly white. For the briefest moment, Poirot thought he saw a figure among the hedges, a dark silhouette, watching. But when he blinked, it was gone. Returning to the drawing room, Poirot found Eleanor seated by the fire, her face pale in the flickering light. She looked up quickly as he entered. You believe it was someone in this house, she said softly. But what if you were wrong? What if Richard's debts have caught up with him? What if someone came in from the storm? Poirot shook his head. No, madam. The glass was prepared here, in the safety of the house. An outsider could not have known which glass Richard would drink from, nor when. This was the work of one close to him. Eleanor shivered. Then we are trapped here with a would-be murderer. Poirot's gaze softened. Yes, madam, but take comfort. It is better the fox be caged than roaming free. We shall unmask them, never fear. She turned back to the fire, and Poirot studied her profile, noting the tension in her jaw, the fear in her eyes. He wondered, was it fear of the crime, or fear of discovery? At midnight, the storm began to ebb. The thunder grew more distant. The rain slackened to a steady patter. But inside Harborough House, the storm had only deepened. Suspicion hung heavy in every corridor, every glance. Poirot stood once more before the fragments of the shattered teacup. He touched the largest shard lightly, his fingers brushing the dark stain. His voice, when he spoke, was low, meant only for himself. Porcelain remembers, and so do I. Chapter 3. The Truth in the Fragments. The storm had passed, leaving London in a fragile quiet. The air still smelled of rain, and the sky outside Lady Agatha Harborough's townhouse was heavy with drifting clouds. Inside, the drawing room was lit brightly now, every lamp burning, as though the light itself might drive away the darkness that had settled upon the house. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, hands folded, his gaze fixed upon the fragments of the shattered teacup arranged neatly once more upon the table. Around him, the cast of players sat or stood uneasily, each with their own secrets pressed tight behind guarded faces. Lady Agatha Harborough sat stiffly in her chair, her hands clenched upon her lap, her fine velvet gown crumpled by her nervous grip. Clara, the maid, lingered at the far side of the room, her pale face marked with fear. Dr. Leonard Pierce, the family physician, had arrived hours before and remained at Poirot's invitation. His eyes darted from Poirot to the others, unease flickering in his every glance. And finally, Inspector Japp leaned against the mantel, arms crossed, jaw set, his patience worn thin. Richard Harborough lay upstairs, recovering slowly from the poison that had nearly claimed his life. His survival, the doctor had said, was nothing short of miraculous. The silence stretched long until Japp muttered, "Well, Poirot, you've dragged us all here. If you found your villain, best spit it out before we all go mad with waiting." Poirot inclined his head. "But of course, my good friend, the time has come to reveal the truth. You see, the matter of the shattered teacup, it is no simple case of clumsiness or temper. It is, in truth, the very heart of this crime." Lady Agatha's voice trembled. "You mean someone sought to kill Richard deliberately?" Poirot lifted a finger. "Not merely Richard, madam, but Richard first, yes. He was the intended victim. Yet the plan was one of cunning and deceit. Allow me to take you step by step, as one arranges the fragments of porcelain until the picture is whole." Poirot gestured toward the table, where the teacup lay broken. This cup was not broken by accident. It was destroyed deliberately, smashed to prevent its contents from being examined. For you see, it once held not tea, but brandy, and within that brandy, poison. Gasps circled the room. Dr. Pierce frowned deeply. "But surely, Richard, he was found with a glass of brandy in the conservatory. Are you saying—" "Precisely, Doctor," Poirot cut in. "The first attempt upon his life was made with the teacup. But when Richard, in a quarrel with Lady Agatha, refused to drink from it, when he dashed it aside, it forced the hand of the would-be murderer. They prepared the brandy glass in the conservatory as a second trap, a desperate act, but one they believed would go unnoticed in the confusion." Clara pressed her hand to her mouth. Lady Agatha's eyes burned with a mixture of fury and dread. "But who? Who could commit such a thing?" Poirot's voice sharpened. "Who, indeed? Let's consider motive. Richard Harborough, the sole heir to his late father's estate, was soon to inherit a fortune that some within this very house coveted. Richard, reckless though he may be, stood in the way of others' ambitions. Remove him, and the path to wealth becomes open. His eyes swept across the room, pausing briefly upon Lady Agatha. You, madam, had quarrels with your nephew. You disapproved of his behavior, his gambling, his defiance, and you control the estate until his majority. If he were gone, perhaps the inheritance might pass differently, yes? Lady Agatha rose abruptly, her face pale with fury. How dare you? I would never harm Richard. He's my sister's son, my blood. Poirot did not flinch. Just so. And yet, the quarrel gave opportunity. But no, yours is not the hand that poured the poison. Your heart may be stern, Lady Agatha, but does not crave blood. No, the guilty one sought to place suspicion upon you, knowing your temper and your quarrel would make you appear culpable. Japp leaned forward. So if not her, then who? Poirot turned slowly, his eyes fixing upon Clara, the maid. Clara let out a choked sob. No, no, Monsieur Poirot. I swear. I only serve. I have no reason. Poirot raised his hand. Calm yourself, mademoiselle. You were but a pawn in this game. You carried trays, you poured drinks, but always at the direction of another. No, the true hand behind this crime is one who understands both medicine and poison, one whose access is unquestioned, one who could slip powder into a glass with the confidence that none would suspect. He turned sharply, his eyes locking upon Dr. Leonard Pierce. The room froze. The physician straightened slowly, his face blanching. This is absurd. You cannot. Mais oui, I can, Poirot declared, his voice ringing. It is you, doctor. You who prescribe powders for Lady Agatha's ailments, who mix tonics for Richard's nerves. You who were ever at hand with medicine that none dared question. And it was you who loved Lady Agatha, not openly, but with a passion you thought concealed. You knew she despised Richard's recklessness. You imagined that if the boy were gone, she would lean upon you, perhaps even marry you. And, of course, you would share in her fortune. Lady Agatha gasped, staggering back. Leonard, no. Tell me it is not true. The doctor's composure cracked. His hand shook. His voice broke into bitterness. Yes, yes, it is true, he cried. Why should that worthless boy inherit everything, while you, Agatha, suffer his insults and his waste? I would have freed you from him, from his drunkenness, his gambling, his cruelty. I would have given you peace, respect, love. Poirot's eyes glimmered coldly. And yet, doctor, in your love you dealt only death. You poisoned a cup. You poisoned a glass. And you nearly condemned the woman you claimed to cherish, for had Richard died, suspicion would have fallen upon her most naturally. Japp stepped forward, snapping out handcuffs. Leonard Pierce, you are under arrest for attempted murder. The doctor sagged, his resistance broken, his face a mask of despair. I only wanted... His voice trailed into silence as the constables led him away. The room fell into quiet once more. Lady Agatha sank into her chair, trembling, her eyes wide with shock. Poirot approached gently, his voice softening. Madam, you have suffered a great blow. But take comfort, your nephew lives. And justice, it too lives, though it is not always without pain. Her eyes filled with tears. I cannot believe it. To think Leonard all this time. Poirot bowed his head. Love, when twisted by envy, can become more dangerous than hatred. It is a lesson we see too often, alas. Japp exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples. Well, Poirot, you've done it again. A broken cup, a storm, a boy nearly dead, and somehow you spin the whole thing into a murder case solved. Poirot's mustache twitched faintly with pride. It is simple, mon ami. The little gray cells, they tell me always, one must look not only at what is present, but what is broken, discarded, forgotten. Even a shattered teacup may hold the truth, if one only listens. The storm clouds outside parted, a shaft of pale light breaking through onto the rain-washed streets. Inside the townhouse, the fragments of porcelain gleamed faintly under the lamps, no longer ominous, but silent relics of a crime uncovered. Hercule Poirot stood a moment longer in the doorway, then turned away, his silhouette framed against the light. Another mystery had been solved, another shadow lifted. Yet in the silence, the detective's mind was already moving on, ever watchful, ever listening for the next whisper of crime. And there you have it. The mystery of the puzzle of the shattered teacup resolved at last. Hercule Poirot, with his unmatched little gray cells, has once again shown us that even the smallest fragment can reveal the deepest truths. If you enjoyed unraveling this mystery with us, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss another case. Until next time, keep your eyes sharp, your mind sharper, and beware the secrets that hide in plain sight.